No, I mean, I will sort of bring up one thing just in the recent past, the club I worked in before, where the person who took over as president of the club, and he's back again as president of the club. It was known by the police. I was even told in advance that this guy, he makes his money from drug trafficking. They said it very clearly. The police said it. He makes his money from bales that fall off tankers that cross the Mediterranean. And when this is brought up and mentioned to a number of the fans of the club, because he was being voted in at that time as a fan-owned club, um, the fans are like, "Well, he'll get the job done and he'll bring us glory." And I don't know, there's a lot of clubs in England, for example, and Mac is going to discuss this in a moment, who have dodgy money around them. I mean, the Fenway Sports Group are heavily invested in the US military industrial complex. So they make money from arms. So, bombs are being dropped in Yemen, they're getting profits from that. So, it depends on what's clean and what's not. So selling drugs is bad, but, selling arms is, well, okay. Andy Mack, over to you on this. You had a bit of a look at English football clubs and a few in particular where there are some questions that should be asked that maybe are not.
Well, I don't think this is going to quite compare to Andy Flint dodging a traffic fine violation out in Siberia, but certainly there was a case that was raised by Al Jazeera towards the end of last year with a man named Christopher Samuelson, who is known in the business as the magician. So effectively, largely what Esau was talking about there, this is a man that will create, he is a trust fund owner by trade, but has been involved in football for almost a decade at least of what this report is able to decipher from the information they've pinged from different clubs and representatives. He effectively acts as an agent for someone who wants to do a takeover of a club in England. And what he does is create numerous offshore companies, subsidiaries, trusts, funds under two different people's names. So like Esau was saying, this will in effect not be traceable back to one person. In doing so, he then had contacts in Cyprus who would create a new EU passport, a new identity. And this Al Jazeera report actually involved two undercover people claiming that they had a Chinese criminal who had been convicted of numerous crimes, some of them pretty high profile ones, totally fictitious. This was all made up. And they approached Derby County, and it actually got to the point where they met owners, they met all sorts of people around the club. And this person had effectively created a mirage where this criminal no longer existed. And they openly admitted to Samuelson that the purpose of buying the club was to launder money. And this is a man that's also brokered deals for Reading, who are on the verge of absolute collapse. Aston Villa as well, about 8 years ago when Villa went through financial turmoil. So not only are they laundering money, they don't care whatsoever about the football. Their business is to get the dirty money through. What happens to the club is kind of irrelevant. But we're now seeing Derby County was so close to having a fictitious person that doesn't exist effectively take over their club while they're in financial ruin. And we were getting all the reports at the time, Derby close to takeover, Derby close to takeover. The people they were meeting with were Al Jazeera reporters. And that never really came to light until this big report came out. It's extremely interesting if you have a look into it. So that just goes to show you how easy, in theory, it is to create so many different lines of channels of where money can go to get put into these clubs. And England is one of the rare cases where there is not enough background checks done into the people that are going in and whether these people even really exist. And we talked about Newcastle being taken over by Saudi Arabia. You can't really hide to that extent, but a Chinese criminal who has done this, where that you don't know the name, you never know the name, but you have two or three people who have a European name to a passport owning different companies off in the Cayman Islands and all sorts. It really beggars belief, and it makes you wonder, considering how successfully they've done it 2 or 3 times already, how and been found out, how many clubs are actually run like this currently.
And it is, Easter, coming to you in a moment, and then to Andrew Flint. But anyway, I mean, that's common. Like, basically, I've always said it, that fans would line up and kiss the feet of the devil herself if she was to take over a club. Realistically, it's like, Ricky Gervais said, that if ISIS were to open a streaming service, you'd all be onto your agents to get a gig, to get a special there. It is true. Fans, for 90% of the time, do not care. They don't care. They really.
They do care when their clubs go under off the back of it.
This is the thing. Yeah, and then they're like, how did we not know? It was the same. Look, we saw the same with Manchester City when they had like a former Thai prime minister taking them over, and had, this is a man who'd like basically slaughtered not drug dealers, but drug users, drug addicts. He slaughtered them. And I don't know. Isold, I mean, you're a Spurs fan. Would you be happy if Daniel Kinahan was going to stick in $500 million in the next transfer window? Would you be happy with that?
Look, we've already got one Daniel in our lives. I don't have the space for another with our current gentleman. But to be honest, that's the thing. It's a lot of fans are so short-sighted in terms of, as Andy has very rightly put it, they don't care where the money's coming from. What they care is when the money's gone. As a Spurs fan, you're very rarely getting money. It's like a tough love relationship with Daniel, which has helped. We're not under his spell. But I think the big thing here is nothing is being done. We don't expect fans to have a moral compass on this, because their short-term vision, as we've seen with Newcastle, Man City, they welcome in new owners with lots of money, despite knowing exactly what they're getting in terms of what goes on in the background to keep this money at this level. And I think if football fans don't have that moral compass, it's not a failing on their part, it's just short-sightedness, then football authorities' job is to be that moral compass, and they fail utterly, particularly in the UK.
I do say the UK as well, but I'd also say that
since the big report was done into it in about 2009, since then FIFA still admitted that they've done absolutely sweet FA about it.
But look, in all fairness, they can't, because even if you look at the TV deals, when you start to dig into them, you think, "Oh wait, how is all this money? Why is all this money being paid? What's coming back to the clubs? Where's it all going?" It's literally just the most perfect washing machine for dirty money, and that's sport in general, but football in particular, because of the scale. It's absolutely unbelievable, and even goes down to tennis. I mean, in the ITF. One of the reasons we had issues over the $10,000 tournaments, which were the lowest level of professional tournaments, the ones where you basically go to get your first pro matches, you go in for qualifying and try to go into the main draw, and so on, you pick up your first points. And there was a brilliant run in Turkey, and it was run in Antalya, and it was in the off season. So the hotel said, we're going to basically take on these 8 tournaments in a row, 8 weeks in a row. So they said, it's great for tourism and so on. Yeah, it was really good. It would have worked very, very well. However, what happened was they had 2 investors, not Russian and not Turkish, but 2 investors came in and stuck €1 million behind the tournaments, €1 million behind the tournaments in total. So that covered all of the costs. And they got around 400 of that back. Now, that was told to me by the tournament director, who then went on to replicate it in Egypt and was actually going to replicate it in Ireland as well, except our current deputy head of state, or the deputy, we call it our Taoiseach, or our deputy prime minister, he basically said that tennis isn't interesting in Ireland. And this is the same guy who turned around and said, when we had a huge push coming on for Wimbledon, when Irish-based players, one Irish, one Russian player, were making it into the main draw of Wimbledon live on BBC TV, and he turned around and said, no one's really interested in tennis in Ireland. This isn't Wimbledon week, people. This is this is a man who was caught sitting picking his nose at a music concert, So, Andrew Flynn, wrapping up with you before we go into the final segment, would you object to somebody coming in to take over from the Glazers? If it was Jeffrey Epstein, for example, coming in, because he's not dead most likely, or at least he was kill rather than hung himself. Would you be happy for him coming in if it were Jeffrey Epstein, Jimmy Savile? Would you object to that?
I honestly would, but I can understand. No, I wouldn't understand. I would not be surprised if a lot of fans would not object. Look at the Newcastle fans. They were driven against Mike Ashley, who, for all I know, is not involved in international crimes. But he has sucked the lifeblood out of the club in terms of his complete disinterest with the football side of things. And Newcastle fans, a lot of whom I've been friends with for a long time and have followed the club since the day they were born, they could not care less. Angle is not so much a moral issue, but a utter dejection with what they've had to go through. Now, as a Manchester United fan, I fully appreciate the irony. If I were to say, oh, I've had to suffer so badly, the last few years have been rubbish, yes. But not enough for me to honestly say, you know, I don't care, I want anybody in. Honestly, I don't. I wouldn't be happy. I wouldn't be able to live with that, because the club, without being too syrupy about it, a club is something different to what all of these businessmen and money washers see them as. For me, at least, and for a lot of fans, it would be too. They represent something. They have to represent something. Otherwise, they stop being a club and you stop being a fan of them. So no, I wouldn't accept it. But a lot of fans would.